Ein Diktat! Ein Diktat!
The use of drugs to improve the effectiveness of troops on the battlefield is really nothing new in warfare. Since ancient times, we can see cases such as the Berserker, Viking warriors with a devastating performance in combat, which made Julius Caesar himself tremble. They went into a frenzy and fought naked against their enemies, whom they bit and tore to pieces in the most brutal ways. Many historians attribute this behavior to the consumption of hallucinogenic mushrooms or beer contaminated with lysergic acid, according to sources dating back to the 13th century. Not surprisingly, almost 1,000 years later, the Germanic armies continued this tradition. Although some drugs such as cocaine and hashish had a widespread medicinal use both in the East and in the West, today we know that Adolf Hitler's forces had a very powerful narcotic that helped them on the battlefield: Pervitin. This methamphetamine, produced by the German state, was deliberately given to the troops during the invasion of Poland, and, although it improved the physical capacity of the men, it also eventually caused a level of addiction that became a problem for the high command. Join us in a new episode of Military History to learn how the armies used drugs during World War II to improve their performance. Are you ready? Then, prepare to travel back in time. Every major war had some drug as a protagonist, even though this is not usually shown in the epic stories that occurred during these conflicts. During the First World War, for example, the use of cocaine and morphine became widespread, which, although they had medical or therapeutic uses, caused open abuse by the troops. During World War II, methamphetamines would be chosen to improve the physical, emotional and psychological performance of soldiers. Later, just to mention it, heroin would be used by more than 70% of Americans deployed to Vietnam. But in this video we'll focus on the pills that played a key role during the 1940s, and that were consumed by Japanese, North American and European soldiers, although the origin of their massive application was in the German ranks. During the beginning of World War II, Germany expanded rapidly thanks to Blitzkrieg, a strategy based on rapid combat, with a large advancing force, taking the defensive forces of the cities by surprise and crushing them in a short time. Beyond its effectiveness, the Blitzkrieg implied a difficulty. The troops, especially the tank corps, had to traverse great distances without resting or refueling, and even carry out consecutive missions for 48 hours. This represented a terrible physical and mental demand for the tankers, engineers, escorts, and other elements that participated in the campaigns. The solution that the German High Command found was to provide its soldiers with a drug that would improve their performance. Pervitin was a derivative of methamphetamine, which provided the necessary physical and psychological stimuli to facilitate blitzkrieg tactics. In terms of bodily performance, it eliminated tiredness and drowsiness, and generated a rush of adrenaline that made soldiers feel strong and energetic. In terms of mental performance, it increased concentration, reflexes, and improved the ability to make decisions, since after consuming the pills, men acquired enormous self-confidence, and even entered a euphoric state like the Viking berserkers. The combination of these two factors made the German soldiers feel, for a period of time, indestructible. This allowed mechanized battalions to advance at inhuman rates, to take entire cities in weeks, if not days, and to constantly harass the enemy relentlessly. Even Winston Churchill was deeply impressed by what he called the feat of the German tank corps, which seemed to be advancing unstoppably on Europe. The initial production of Pervitin was 35 million pills, which were distributed among troops heading to the front lines. However, by 1940 and onwards, production had to be increased, since the German High Command did not count on the great side effect of any psychoactive drug addiction. Large contingents of soldiers became deeply addicted to Pervitin, leading to all the typical problems that drug use, once stopped, creates. To begin with, when the effect of methamphetamine wore off, men who had used it constantly for several weeks experienced all the accumulated fatigue, which left them out of action for entire days. Worse still was the withdrawal syndrome, which caused constant physical discomfort, as well as fits of rage that promoted violence among Hitler's own ranks. Many soldiers died from Pervitin, some from cardiac arrest due to overdose, others from physical exhaustion after abusing the drug for long periods, completely destroying their metabolism, and, to a lesser extent, killed by their comrades to get a handful of pills when methamphetamine became scarce. In many cases, they suffered partial or total psychological damage, with panic or anxiety attacks, hallucinations, stress, night terrors, among other disabling problems. This was because in 1941, Germany decided to reduce the production of Pervitin to a minimum. One of the factors was that the drug leaked into the civilian population, and, although a prescription was required to legally acquire it, a fairly large parallel market was created. It also began to be widely consumed by German officers not on the front lines, with some sources indicating that even the Führer himself became addicted to the pills. At the same time, some shipments were sent for the troops that acted in the Barbarossa operation, although, unlike the initial campaigns in Poland and Eastern Europe, it did not have a positive impact. Taken together, Pervitin, which began as a tool to make the German expansionist tactic work, became a thorn in the side of the Nazi top brass. The Allies, for their part, tried to replicate the strategy by using a methamphetamine pill very similar to what we now call speed, with an effect similar to Pervitin, but due to the problems it was causing Hitler, they did not delve into its use. In fact, among the ranks of the United States and Great Britain, drug abuse was related to morphine, which was given in large quantities to doctors for application on the battlefield. On the other hand, since historians have brought to light this story, which was hidden for several years, a great controversy has arisen, since there are those who assure that, if they were drug addicts, Nazi officials, including Hitler, could have acted by will but under the alienating effects of consumption. However, many experts say that it is impossible to justify the genocide carried out by the National Socialist Party, as well as the desire to conquer all of Europe, with dependence on Pervitin. We are reaching the end of this video, and we want to know your opinion. Do you think that the current military forces continue to promote or abuse psychoactive substances to obtain better results in the performance of the troops? Leave us your answer in the comment box below, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel. Also remember to follow us on Facebook and Instagram to learn about many more military events that left their mark on history. Thank you very much for joining us until the end. And stay tuned for our next video.